The great hall of the Galactic Science Council was silent. Beings from 1,000 worlds sat in their seats, their many eyes fixed on the central platform. The air was thick with tension and something like shame. For 10,000 years, the greatest minds of the galaxy had failed, and now they were about to admit it. High Counselor Vexthal, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, stood at the center of the platform. Her voice echoed through the hall as she spoke the words that no one wanted to hear. "We have exhausted all options," she said. "The 7 unsolvable problems remain unsolved. After 10 millennia of our best efforts, we must accept that some questions have no answers." A murmur passed through the crowd. The 7 unsolvable problems were famous across the galaxy. They were ancient puzzles left behind by the precursors, a race so old that no one remembered their true name. The precursors had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins, broken machines, and these 7 impossible questions. Each problem was carved into a great stone tablet, written in a language that took the galaxy 5,000 years to translate. The problems seemed simple at first glance, but every attempt to solve them had failed. Every theory had crumbled. Every genius had walked away in defeat. The tablets themselves were mysteries. They were made of a material that no one could identify. They could not be damaged or destroyed. They simply sat in the chamber of questions, waiting for answers that never came. "Perhaps," said a voice from the back of the hall, "we should ask the humans." The hall erupted in laughter. High Counselor Vexthal raised her 4 hands for silence, but even she had a small smile on her face. The humans, those strange, chaotic creatures from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. They had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. They were young, primitive, and often confused. Their ships were slow. Their technology was basic. They still used physical buttons instead of thought interface controls. They still cooked food with fire instead of using molecular resequencers. "Ambassador Grix," Vexthal said, turning to look at the being who had spoken. "Surely you jest. The humans can barely manage their own planet. They are children in the cosmic sense." Ambassador Grix was a being made of living crystal. His body chimed softly as he moved forward. Light danced through his transparent form, creating rainbows on the floor. "I do not jest, High Counselor. I have spent 20 years among the humans. I have seen things that I cannot explain." "Such as?" asked another council member, a cloud-like being named Thos. Grix paused, his crystal form flickering with light. "They think differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. Where we see walls, they see doors. Where we see endings, they see beginnings. They have a word for it. They call it lateral thinking." The hall was quiet now. No one was laughing anymore. "They solved the Keth paradox," Grix continued. "Not through mathematics, through something they call duct tape and what they described as hitting it until it works." "The Keth paradox," Vexthal leaned forward. "That was a simple energy distribution problem, hardly comparable to the 7 unsolvable problems." "Simple for us, yes," Grix agreed. "But they solved it in ways we never considered. They broke our assumptions. They asked questions we thought were too foolish to ask." Another council member, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, pulsed with irritation. "This is absurd. We have had the finest mathematicians, the greatest philosophers, the most advanced artificial minds working on these problems. And you suggest we bring in primitives who still burn hydrocarbons for transport." Grix's crystal form chimed in what might have been a laugh. "Yes, exactly that. Because sometimes the answer is not about being smarter, it is about being different." The council members whispered among themselves. The idea was absurd, ridiculous, and yet they had nothing else to try. 10,000 years of failure had a way of making even ridiculous ideas seem worth considering. "Very well," said Vexthal at last. "We have nothing to lose except more time. Send a delegation to Earth. Invite their scientists to examine the problems. But I warn you, Ambassador Grix, if this is a waste of our resources, you will answer for it." Grix bowed, his crystal body singing softly. "I accept that responsibility, High Counselor. I believe you will be surprised." 3 months later, a ship carrying 12 human scientists arrived at the Galactic Science Council headquarters. The building was a massive structure floating in space, larger than some moons. It had been designed by the greatest architects of 50 species, and it was considered the most beautiful building in the galaxy. The humans stepped off their ship and looked around with wide eyes. They were a strange group. Some were young, barely 30 years old. Others were older, with gray hair and wrinkled faces. They wore simple clothes, not the formal robes of the council, but something they called lab coats and jeans. Their leader was a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen. She was small, with short black hair and glasses that sat crookedly on her nose. She looked nothing like a genius. She looked like someone's grandmother who had accidentally wandered into a science fiction movie. Vexthel greeted them personally, her 4 arms folded across her chest. "Welcome to the Galactic Science Council. I am High Counselor Vexthel. I must admit, I have my doubts about this mission." Dr. Chen smiled. "So do we, to be honest. These problems have stumped the smartest beings in the galaxy for 10,000 years. We're just a bunch of curious monkeys from a planet you probably can't find on a map." "I can find it on a map," Vexthel said, slightly offended. "Right, sorry, figure of speech." Dr. Chen looked around at the massive hall at the strange beings watching them from every corner. "Look, we're not here to promise miracles. We're just here to take a look. Fresh eyes, you know. Sometimes that's all you need." Vexthel led the humans to the Chamber of Questions, where the 7 stone tablets stood in a circle. Each tablet was 3 meters tall, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move in the light. The tablets hummed with ancient energy. They felt alive somehow, waiting and watching. The humans walked around the chamber, looking at each tablet with curiosity. They pulled out notebooks and pencils, actual paper and graphite, which made several council members gasp in shock. They talked quietly among themselves, pointing at symbols and scratching their heads. One of the younger scientists, a man named Dr. James Park, stood in front of the first tablet. "So this is the first unsolvable problem." "Yes," said Vexthel. "It asks, what is the sound of nothing? We have tried every answer. We have explored the nature of silence, of vacuum, of non-existence. Nothing works." Dr. Park nodded slowly. "And what happens when you give a wrong answer?" "The tablet does nothing. It remains unchanged. Only a correct answer will make it respond." Dr. Park stared at the tablet for a long moment. Then he shrugged and turned to his colleagues. "Hey, anyone remember that old koan? You know, the one about one hand clapping?" Dr. Chen walked over. "You think it's like a Zen riddle?" "Maybe, or maybe it's asking the wrong question entirely. Like, what if nothing isn't meant to be literal?" Vexthel frowned. "I don't understand. Nothing is nothing. That is its definition." "Sure, but humans have a weird relationship with nothing," said another scientist, Dr. Maya Patel. "In some of our languages, double negatives make a positive. In others, they make a stronger negative. Nothing can mean something depending on context." The aliens in the room exchanged confused looks. The humans were already breaking their assumptions, and they had been in the chamber for less than an hour. Dr. Chen walked up to the first tablet. She looked at it for a long moment, studying the ancient symbols. Then she raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Nothing happened. She snapped again, and then she stopped snapping and simply held her fingers together, not making a sound. The tablet glowed. Every alien in the room gasped. In 10,000 years, the tablet had never glowed. Not once, not for any answer. "What did you do?" Vexthel demanded. Dr. Chen looked back at her, a strange expression on her face. "I showed it the sound of nothing, the absence of a sound, the snap that doesn't happen. But that makes no sense. Does it have to? Dr. Chen asked. The question wasn't what is nothing. It was what is the sound of nothing? The sound of nothing is potential, the sound that could happen but doesn't, the space where sound should be. The tablet pulsed brighter and suddenly words appeared on its surface. Not in the ancient language but in English. It read, accepted. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members were shouting, crying, praying to their various gods. Ambassador Grick stood in the corner, his crystal body ringing like a bell. He looked pleased in the way that crystals can look pleased. Dr. Chen stepped back from the tablet looking slightly dazed. Well, she said quietly, that was unexpected. The other scientists gathered around her, their faces a mixture of excitement and fear. They had done something impossible. They had solved one of the 7 unsolvable problems in less than an hour. What had the galaxy's greatest minds missed for 10,000 years? The answer was simple. They had been thinking too hard. The humans looked at the remaining 6 tablets, 6 more problems, 6 more ancient puzzles. Dr. Park grinned. So, who wants to try the next one? And just like that, everything changed. News of the first solved problem spread across the galaxy like fire. Worlds that had given up hope suddenly felt it again. Scientists who had spent their careers in failure watched in disbelief as a small human woman cracked a puzzle that had defeated entire civilizations. But the Galactic Science Council was not ready to celebrate. There were still 6 problems left, and what worked once might never work again. The second tablet was placed before the humans the next day. Vexthel stood nearby, watching with a mixture of hope and doubt. She had not slept since the first tablet had been solved. She was not sure she would ever sleep again. The second problem read, what is the weight of a shadow? Dr. James Park stepped forward. He had been quiet since the first solution, thinking hard about what they had done. Okay, he said, let's not overthink this. What do we know about shadows? A shadow is the absence of light, said Thos, the cloud-like council member. It has no physical form, therefore it has no weight, but that answer has been tried. The tablet rejected it. Of course it did, said Dr. Maya Patel, because that's the obvious answer, and these problems aren't about obvious answers. Dr. Chen nodded. The first problem taught us something. These aren't math problems, they're philosophy problems. They're about how we think about things. So how do we think about shadows? Park asked. The humans huddled together, talking in low voices. The aliens watched them with curiosity and some frustration. Why did they need to talk so much? Why couldn't they just think quietly like civilized beings? Finally, Dr. Chen turned back to the tablet. May I have a light source? Vexthel gestured, and a small floating orb appeared, glowing softly. Dr. Chen positioned it near her hand, casting a shadow on the floor. Watch, she said. She held a small piece of paper in her shadow. Then she moved her hand, causing the shadow to shift. The paper moved slightly as the shadow passed over it. The shadow has weight, she said. Light exerts pressure. Photons have momentum. When something blocks light and creates a shadow, the shadow is the absence of that pressure. It's not nothing, it's negative pressure. The weight of a shadow is the weight of the light it removes. She turned to the tablet. The weight of a shadow is negative. It's the absence of light pressure. It doesn't push down, it creates a space where pushing doesn't happen. The tablet considered this for a moment. Then it glowed and words appeared, accepted. The hall erupted again. 2 problems solved in 2 days. The humans were doing the impossible. But the third problem was harder, much harder. It read, where does the lost thing go? The humans stared at it for hours. They discussed and debated. They drew diagrams and equations on their notebooks. Dr. Chen called for more coffee, a strange black drink that seemed to fuel human thinking. The aliens had never seen anything like it. The humans drank gallons of the stuff, becoming more energetic and more erratic with each cup. Days passed, then weeks. The council members grew restless. Perhaps the first two solutions had been luck. Perhaps the humans had reached their limit. But Dr. Chen was not ready to give up. "We're thinking about this wrong," she said on the 15th day. "We keep assuming lost means physically misplaced, but what if it means something else?" "Like what?" asked Dr. Patel. "Like forgotten, like where do forgotten memories go? Where do lost opportunities go? Where does time go after it passes?" Dr. Park rubbed his eyes. He had been awake for 36 hours. "You're saying it's not about physical objects?" "Maybe, or maybe it's both. Maybe lost is a category that includes everything from your car keys to your childhood dreams." The aliens in the room stirred uncomfortably. This was a strange kind of thinking. It mixed the practical with the emotional, the scientific with the poetic. It was very human. A young scientist named Dr. Tom Bradley spoke up. "What about entropy? Lost things disperse. They break down. A lost ball becomes scattered atoms over time." "That's closer," Dr. Chen said, excitement building in her voice. "But it's not just physical. It's about information too. Lost memories don't disappear. They get absorbed into other memories, become part of our general sense of the world." She walked up to the tablet. She placed her hand on its surface. "The lost thing goes into memory," she said. "Not perfect memory, imperfect memory, distorted memory. It becomes a story we tell ourselves about what we once had. It lives in the gap between reality and remembrance." The tablet remained dark. Dr. Chen frowned. "Not quite right, but close," she thought for another moment. "The lost thing goes into potential. It becomes something that could be found again. It enters a state of possibility, waiting to be remembered or discovered." Still nothing. She stepped back, frustrated. "I'm missing something." Dr. Park walked up beside her. "What if we're still too abstract? What if the question is literal, but in a way we don't expect?" "What do you mean?" "Well, in physics, nothing is truly lost. Energy is conserved. Matter is conserved. When something seems lost, it's really just redistributed." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "That's it. That's exactly it." She turned back to the tablet. "The lost thing goes everywhere. It spreads out. It becomes part of everything else. A lost coin becomes oxidized metal in the soil, which becomes part of plants, which become part of animals, which become part of people. A lost memory breaks down into its component parts, emotions, images, sensations, and they get absorbed into other memories. Nothing is ever truly lost. It just becomes unrecognizable." The tablet glowed, accepted. 3 down, 4 to go. The humans had found their rhythm now. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, bouncing ideas off each other, challenging assumptions, asking the strange questions that no one else thought to ask. The fourth problem asked, "When does the first moment end?" This one took them only 3 days. Dr. Bradley, the youngest of the group, figured it out. "The first moment never ends," he said, "because every moment is the first moment of what comes next. The past doesn't end. It transforms into the present, which transforms into the future. It's all one continuous flow. The first moment is still happening now." Accepted. The fifth problem was trickier. What makes a thing itself? Dr. Patel took the lead on this one. She had a background in philosophy of mind, and she understood the question's deep implications. "Identity is not about substance," she said after a week of deliberation. "It's about pattern. A thing is itself because of its relationships, its history, its connections to other things. Change the atoms but keep the pattern and it's still the same thing. Change the pattern but keep the atoms and it becomes something else." She approached the tablet with confidence. What makes a thing itself is continuity of pattern across change. It is not what a thing is made of, but how those parts relate to each other and to the rest of the universe. Accepted. 5 problems solved, 2 remained. By the 30th day, the humans had become legends. Their faces appeared on broadcasts across 1,000 worlds. Their methods, their strange, chaotic, sideways thinking, were studied and debated and sometimes dismissed as luck. But those who had been in the chamber knew the truth. The council was in an uproar. For the first time in 10,000 years, real progress had been made. The 7 unsolvable problems were becoming solvable. The precursor legacy was being unlocked. But the 6th problem was different. It read, "What happens when nothing changes?" The humans stared at it. They talked and argued. They drank rivers of coffee, but nothing they tried worked. The days stretched into weeks. The weeks stretched into months. And slowly, the humans began to realize something terrible. The 6th problem was not like the others. It was not a riddle about perception or philosophy. It was a trap. "Think about it," Dr. Park said late one night. "Every answer we give changes something. The act of answering is a change. So if the question asks what happens when nothing changes, our answer automatically makes things change. It's a paradox." "A true paradox," Dr. Patel agreed. "Not a riddle with a clever solution, an actual logical impossibility." Dr. Chen sat in silence, staring at the tablet. She had not slept in days. Her eyes were hollow and her hands trembled. The other scientists watched her with concern. They had never seen her like this, defeated, exhausted, lost. "Maybe that's the point," she said finally. "Maybe the precursors weren't asking for a solution. Maybe they were asking for something else entirely." "Like what?" Dr. Bradley asked, handing her another cup of coffee. "Like acceptance, like understanding that some things can't be solved. Maybe the answer is admitting that there is no answer." She stood up slowly and walked to the tablet. Her heart was pounding. This was different from the others. This felt dangerous somehow. She could feel the tablet watching her, waiting for her to fail like everyone else who had come before. The answer to what happens when nothing changes is nothing. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. The question answers itself. The act of asking changes nothing because the question is about the absence of change. The tablet flickered. Dr. Chen held her breath. Then it went dark again. "Rejected." She stepped back, feeling a chill run down her spine. This was wrong. Something was very wrong. That night she dreamed of the precursors. She saw them in her mind, tall, graceful beings made of light and shadow. They were building the tablets, carving the questions into stone. But their faces were not peaceful. They were afraid. They were desperate. They were trying to leave a message for someone, anyone, who might come after them. She woke up gasping, covered in sweat. "I know what the 6th problem is," she told her team the next morning. "It's not a puzzle, it's a warning." The humans gathered around her, their faces pale and tired. They had all been struggling with this problem. It haunted their dreams and dominated their waking thoughts. "The precursors vanished millions of years ago," Dr. Chen explained. "No one knows why. We assume they ascended to a higher plane or moved to another dimension or simply died out. But what if they didn't? What if they got stuck?" "Stuck how?" Dr. Park asked. "In a state of no change, perfect stasis, eternal unchanging existence." Dr. Chen's voice was grim. "Think about it, an immortal civilization with infinite knowledge. What is their greatest fear? Not death, they conquered that. Not ignorance, they knew everything. Their greatest fear was stagnation, being trapped in a moment forever, unable to grow, unable to learn, unable to change." The team was silent. The implication was horrifying. "The 6th problem isn't asking for an answer," Dr. Chen continued. "It's asking for a rescue. It's asking someone to understand what happened to them so that we can avoid the same fate." She turned back to the tablet. "What happens when nothing changes? The precursors happened. They froze. They stopped. They became a warning carved in stone, hoping that someone would eventually understand." The tablet glowed brighter than any of the others had. Words appeared. "You understand." And then something incredible happened. The tablet cracked open. revealing a hidden chamber inside. And in that chamber was a single object, a crystal that pulsed with ancient light. It was beautiful and terrible, filled with the compressed knowledge of 1 billion years. Dr. Chen reached in and took it. The moment she touched it, knowledge flooded into her mind. Images, equations, memories, the complete history of the precursor civilization. She saw their rise from primitive beings to masters of the universe. She saw their glory, their achievements, their incredible works of art and science. She saw their slow descent into perfection, learning everything, solving everything, becoming everything. And she saw their final, terrible mistake. They had achieved everything, solved every problem, answered every question, and in doing so they had lost the one thing that mattered: the capacity to wonder. Without questions to ask, they had stopped changing. Without change, they had stopped living. They had become monuments to their own success, frozen, perfect, and utterly dead. Dr. Chen opened her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. "The seventh problem," she whispered. "I know what it is, and I know how to solve it. But the solution would require something that no civilization in the galaxy had ever done. It would require admitting that perfection was the enemy of progress. And the galaxy was about to learn that the most important question was not the one that could be answered, but the one that never should be." The final tablet stood before Dr. Sarah Chen like a judge awaiting a verdict. She had not slept since touching the precursor crystal. The knowledge inside it burned in her mind. 1 billion years of history, of triumph, of terrible failure. The seventh problem was the simplest of all. It read, "What is the final question?" The council chamber was packed. Beings from every corner of the galaxy had come to witness this moment. High Counselor Vexthal stood beside the humans, her silver skin pale with exhaustion and hope. Ambassador Grix chimed softly in the corner, his crystal body reflecting the light of 1,000 worried eyes. Dr. Park stood close to Dr. Chen. "Are you sure about this?" "No," she admitted, "but I understand now. The precursors didn't create these problems to test us. They created them to teach us." "Teach us what?" "That the journey matters more than the destination, that the question matters more than the answer." She looked at the tablet, her eyes filled with something beyond determination, something like reverence. They solved everything, every mathematical problem, every physical law, every mystery of existence, and it killed them. Dr. Patel stepped forward. "But how is that possible? Wouldn't solving everything make them gods?" "It did, and that was the problem." Dr. Chen held up the precursor crystal. "I saw it in their memories. The moment they answered the last question, they stopped growing. They had nowhere left to go, nothing left to discover. They became perfect, and perfection is static, unchanging, dead." Vexthal's forearms trembled. "Then what hope is there for us? Are we all doomed to the same fate?" "No, because we can learn from them." Dr. Chen turned to face the assembly. "The precursors left these problems as a gift. Each one was designed to teach a lesson. The sound of nothing taught us that meaning comes from contrast. The weight of a shadow taught us that absence has presence. The lost thing taught us that nothing truly disappears. Each solution brought us closer to understanding their final warning." "And what is that warning?" asked Thas, his cloud-like form swirling anxiously. Dr. Chen walked to the seventh tablet. She placed her hand on its surface, feeling the ancient stone vibrate with anticipation. "The final question," she said, "is not about finding answers. It's about choosing not to find them." Silence fell over the chamber. Even the humming of the station's life support systems seemed to grow quiet. The precursors answered everything. They left nothing unknown. And in doing so, they stripped the universe of its mystery, its wonder, its purpose. They had nothing left to live for. Dr. Chen's voice grew stronger. "The seventh problem asks, what is the final question? And the answer is, there should never be one." She pressed her palm flat against the tablet. The final question is the one you never ask. It's the mystery you preserve. It's the unknown you protect. It's the door you choose not to open so that future generations always have somewhere to go, something to discover, a reason to keep exploring. The tablet remained silent. Dr. Chen closed her eyes. She thought about her own life, the questions that had driven her, the mysteries that had kept her curious, the joy of not knowing and then learning. She thought about humanity, a species that had clawed its way from caves to stars, not because they had answers but because they had questions. The final question, she said, her voice barely a whisper, is the one I will never ask. It's the one I choose to leave for someone else. Because the greatest gift we can give the future is not knowledge, it's wonder. The tablet blazed with light. But this time it didn't just glow, it opened. The stone split apart, revealing not a hidden chamber but a doorway, a portal of swirling colors and impossible geometries. Through it, Dr. Chen could see something vast and beautiful, a realm of endless possibility, a universe of pure potential. And standing in that realm, waiting, were the precursors. They had not died, they had not ascended, they had been trapped, frozen in the moment of their final answer, unable to move forward because there was nowhere to go. They had been waiting for someone to understand, for someone to free them. Dr. Chen stepped forward, but a hand caught her arm. It was Dr. Park. "Sarah, wait, you don't know what's through there." She smiled at him. "That's exactly why I'm going. Someone has to tell them. Someone has to show them that it's okay to not know everything, that mysteries are not problems to be solved, they're treasures to be protected." She turned to face the assembly one last time. The precursors made one mistake. They thought perfection was the goal, but perfection is a prison. The true goal is growth, change, discovery, and that means accepting that some questions should never be answered. Vexthal stepped forward, her silver face streaked with tears. "Dr. Chen, Sarah, you have given us more than solutions. You have given us a new way of thinking." "I gave you what humans have always known," Dr. Chen said, "that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be confused and lost and uncertain, because that's what makes life worth living. The struggle, the search, the endless, beautiful journey of trying to understand." She released Dr. Park's hand and walked toward the portal. The precursors watched her approach. They were beings of pure energy now, formless, timeless, neither alive nor dead. They had been waiting for millions of years for someone to understand what they had done wrong. Dr. Chen stepped through the portal. The moment she did, she felt their minds touch hers. It was overwhelming, a billion voices speaking at once, asking the same question. "Can we be saved?" "Yes," she said, "but not by finding answers, by asking new questions." She reached out with her thoughts and shared with them everything she had learned. The joy of childhood curiosity, the thrill of scientific discovery, the beauty of a sunset that no equation could capture, the love of a parent for a child, unexplainable and irrational and perfect. She showed them humanity, messy, chaotic, flawed humanity, a species that had never solved all its problems and probably never would. A species that still argued about politics and art and the best way to make coffee. A species that, despite all its knowledge, still looked up at the stars and wondered. The precursors absorbed her thoughts, and slowly something changed. They began to remember what it felt like to not know. They began to remember wonder. The frozen perfection that had trapped them for millions of years started to crack. Energy flowed through them again. Time resumed its passage. They were no longer monuments, they were alive. One of them stepped forward, taking a form that Dr. Chen could comprehend. It appeared as a tall being made of light, with a face that shifted between 1,000 different expressions. "Thank you," it said. "We had forgotten. We had forgotten what it meant to be incomplete, to be imperfect, to be curious." "What will you do now?" Dr. Chen asked. The being smiled, or what passed for a smile among creatures of pure energy. We will explore, not to find answers but to find questions. We will travel to the edge of the universe and beyond, not to solve its mysteries but to marvel at them. And if you find the final answer, we will not look. The being extended a hand made of starlight. Will you join us? Dr. Chen hesitated. The offer was tempting. Eternal existence, exploring the cosmos with beings of infinite wisdom, but she shook her head. I can't. My place is with my people, with humanity. We have our own questions to ask, our own mysteries to protect. The being nodded. We understand, and we are grateful. You have given us something more valuable than any solution. What's that? Hope, the hope that there will always be something to discover, something to wonder about, something to keep the universe alive. Dr. Chen smiled. Then she turned and walked back through the portal. When she emerged in the council chamber, everything had changed. The 7 tablets were gone, dissolved into dust, their purpose fulfilled. In their place stood 7 beams of light, marking the spots where they had been. The precursors were free. The 7 unsolvable problems had been solved, not with answers but with understanding. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the months that followed, the human scientists became legends. Their faces appeared on broadcasts across 1,000 worlds. Their methods, their strange, chaotic, sideways thinking, were studied and debated and sometimes dismissed as luck. But those who had been in the chamber knew the truth. Humanity had not solved the problems through superior intelligence. They had solved them through something far more valuable: the willingness to be wrong, the courage to ask stupid questions, the humility to admit that they didn't have all the answers. Dr. Chen returned to Earth, exhausted but happy. She went back to her small university, back to her cluttered office and her lukewarm coffee and her students who asked too many questions. She refused all offers to become famous, to lead great institutions, to be worshipped as a hero. And sometimes, late at night, she would look up at the stars and wonder. What other mysteries were out there? What other questions were waiting to be asked? What other civilizations had made the same mistake as the precursors, reaching for perfection and losing their souls? She didn't know, and that was beautiful. The Galactic Science Council established a new department, dedicated not to solving problems but to preserving mysteries. They called it the Office of Wonder. Its purpose was to identify questions that should never be answered, secrets that were too important to reveal, puzzles that were too precious to solve. Ambassador Grix became its first director. He was perfect for the job, he said, because crystals understood the value of beautiful imperfection. Every crystal had flaws, he explained, and those flaws gave each one its unique character. And across the galaxy, civilizations began to change. They stopped racing toward total knowledge. They stopped trying to solve everything. They learned to celebrate the unknown, to treasure the mysterious, to embrace the uncomfortable joy of not understanding. Some problems, they realized, were not meant to be solved. Some questions were not meant to be answered. And some doors were meant to stay closed, not because of what was behind them, but because the act of wondering was more valuable than any truth. The humans had taught them that. A species of confused, chaotic, curious monkeys from a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere had done what 1,000,000,000 years of galactic wisdom could not. They had reminded the universe how to dream. And in that reminder, in that simple act of preserved wonder, was the greatest solution of all. Not to every problem, but to the only one that truly mattered. The problem of meaning. The problem of purpose. The problem of why we exist at all. The answer, as it turned out, was never the point. The question was, and humanity, with all its flaws and failures and endless curiosity, would keep asking questions until the stars themselves burned out. And even then, they would probably find a way to ask more. because that's what humans do. They wonder. They dream. They reach for the impossible and laugh when they fail. And somehow, against all odds, they keep going. In the end, that was the real solution to the 7 unsolvable problems. Not logic. Not mathematics. Not perfect intelligence. Just the stubborn, beautiful, relentless human spirit. The spirit that looks at the universe and says, I don't understand you, not fully, maybe not ever, but I'm going to keep trying because that's what makes life worth living. And somewhere, in a realm of infinite possibility, the precursors were finally learning to do the same. The story was over. But the wonder was just beginning.